Hello, everyone, and thank you for joining us for Long Beach Symphony's Musically Speaking, hosted by our music director, Eckart Preu. My name is Kelly Lucera. I'm president of the Long Beach Symphony, and we're so excited to bring you this virtual series featuring interviews with world-class performers, conductors, and composers, combined with artistic topics relevant to today's world. And now, please welcome to our virtual stage, Musically Speaking host and music director of the Long Beach Symphony, music director Eckart Preu, and our very talented guest, violinist Paul Huang.
Thank you, Kelly, and thank you, Paul. Thank you so much for joining us here today. Welcome.
Thank you very much for having me. Hello, everyone.
Paul, I remember your performance with the Long Beach Symphony very vividly. It was almost exactly a year ago. It was November 2019 when you played the Dvorak violin concerto with us, which feels like an eternity ago, and it was so much fun. But now, at least according to Facebook, you are back in your home country in Taiwan, in Taipei. Tell us a little bit about what it's like there and what you're up to there.
Well, it's good to see you, Eckart. It's great to be with Long Beach Symphony. I had great memories, last year doing the Dvorak concerto with everyone, and the audience was so enthusiastic. It's something that I remember still to these days. So actually, I'm in Taipei right now. I came back to Taipei in the early November, and I had to do my quarantines. 15 days of quarantines, very strict quarantines in the hotels. You're not allowed to go outside. They even don't give you the key so that you cannot get out. And now I'm actually out for about 2 weeks now. And then I came back here specifically for my engagement with the National Symphony Orchestras in Taiwan, where I'm the artist in residence for the season. So this is the part one of my residencies with them throughout the season. And Taiwan's been doing really well with the COVID. It's been the last 200 some days of zero COVID cases, domestic COVID cases. And so life is very much normal. And in fact, actually, when I first came out of my quarantine the first day, I was almost in tears when I was walking on the street, because I don't remember this kind of normalcies since March, and it's really quite emotional. And everyone is just going about on their daily life, going to movie theater, going to concert halls, and the fact that people know that going to concert hall is, they don't take it for granted anymore. And so the concert has been completely sold out, almost every concert, and people realizing Taiwan is the place, probably the only places to play concerts, and everyone is so willing to do 15 days strict quarantine. Yo-Yo Ma was just here. Daniel Trifonov came as well, and there'll be a couple more. Actually, when I come back in March, Leonard Slacken is coming to join me for the next part 2 of my residencies. So it's actually a very exciting time in Taiwan, and the arts is so blossoming right now, more than ever. The government,
and I assume that even for people like Yo-Yo Ma or so, there's still 15 days of quarantine. There's no exceptions, right? Even if you're Yo-Yo, which is kind of, what do you do? What do you do during those 15 days in your hotel? I mean, what can you do? I mean, how many hours can you possibly practice?
Well, luckily, I'm actually a very solitary person, so I really enjoy quarantining. Actually, I actually kind of missed it when I was coming out of the quarantine. I was saying goodbye to my room. I said, "I'll see you in March again." I really enjoyed it. I came here in November, and then during the quarantines, I was, actually quite busy. I had a few projects that I had to mount, and I have deadlines for them, and I read, I practice, and the meals are incredible here, even though it's deliveries in Taiwan. The Uber Eats and all the food in Taiwan is super inexpensive, and the quality is just so great. So if you wanted to quarantine anywhere in the world, you should quarantine in Taiwan, because this is the place to quarantine. There's nowhere else you can quarantine better than in Taiwan. You feel like you're a royal, actually. It's like food just comes to your door, and then the quality is so great. And then also I was following the elections in America as well during that time, which so that was take a lot of time off my quarantine, and I do laundries myself because I cannot do anything outside of it, so I had to wash everything myself. And actually the day passes quick. You wake up around 6 or 7, and then you have watch a little bit of television, and this and that. You practice until noon, and then you take a quick nap, and you have lunch. Actually days go by quick, and then I like this kind of silence where nobody is allowed to bother me. so it's actually quite nice. I really enjoyed it, and I get a lot of things done.
Right. And in the meantime, you played, I think, at least one concert with the National Symphony of Taiwan, the Brahms Concerto. Now, you wrote something very interesting on Facebook, and it goes like, I think that Taipei has the best audience in the world, which is an interesting statement because, yes, we performers react to I guess the energy of our audience. But I mean, so in your opinion, what makes an audience a good audience? I mean, is the enthusiastic applause when you come in, or how do you interact with your audience?
I think what was the most memorable feeling for me last week when I played the Brahms Concerto with the orchestra was the fact that the hall was completely full. It was about 2,000 seats, and you couldn't hear a pin drop throughout the whole performance. And that's how attentive they are. And that kind of silence, that kind of intensity of listening is something that the artists feel immediately on stage. They're listening. When there's nobody coughing, that they're really paying attention to it, and then something that they're drawn into it. And so that was something that was very special. And then, of course, at the end, I mean, the enthusiasm from the feedback of your performance was nothing short of a thunderstorm. And I think that kind of contrast makes a very special evening, as far as I'm concerned.
Right. And of course, I mean, the whole situation is very special anyway, and I'm sure everybody in Taiwan is aware of it. You're aware of it, and I think that just intensifies, I think, the experience for actually performing live on stage. Now, I'm wondering, so now you're back in Taiwan. So I've been living in the States for 25 years, and I feel very German when I'm here, and I feel very American when I'm back in Germany. And I was wondering if you have several similar experiences. I mean, you were born in Taiwan, but you've been living in the States for a very long time. I think it's almost close to 20 years. But emotionally, where do you belong more?
I think I'm deeply rooted as a Taiwanese still, even though I live in New York. And I think very Taiwanese, even though I've adopted a lot of American mentality. But at the end of the day, I cook Taiwanese, in New York. I almost don't eat Western food. But I actually understand what you mean, because I feel like my English is not getting better and my Chinese is getting worse. And I think it's just gonna go that way, the trajectories. So like at the end, I just don't know what to speak anymore.
Right. And I remember, when I moved from Germany to New York, it was like someone had hit me over the head, with a hammer or something. It took me quite a few years to kind of just find my place emotionally, but actually any place in New York City, in society in general. And sometimes I don't even know how I survived, because probably I was young. But when you left Taiwan to study in New York, how did you experience the culture shock? Or maybe it wasn't shock, or maybe you were just like practicing all day. I mean, how did you experience your initial time in New York City?
Excuse me. I think when I first came to New York, actually it was a very exciting time in my life, because I was also like you, very young. I was about 12. So I didn't really know, the actual real world, except for being very excited to learn a lot of new things, especially playing the violin. So for me, it was an exciting time to be in New York, and then to meet with people, and to meet with people from all walks of life and different countries. And that's not something that I have experienced before in Taiwan. But later on, I realized that the society functions quite a bit different in terms of human interactions. I came from a very small town in Tainan, it's in the south part of Taiwan. And I'm very used to, not locking my doors, and I'm very used to neighbor being very, very friendly. And I'm used to very straightforward talking, a very direct way of talking and very simple talking. And that's something that I learned in America, or in New York, specifically, where it's one of the biggest cities in the world, and you cannot help it, but there is a filter between human interactions, and that's something that I learned later. And it's funny, and there's actually, I remember vividly, American phrase, there is such a thing of saying, oh, I'll see you later. And if you translate directly in Chinese, see you later means that you will still see me, like a few hours later, something like that. But see you later in American can mean that just, whenever next
Go away.
time. Again, yeah. Whenever we meet again, it's not a concrete thing. Yeah. So whenever people, at first when they says, oh, I'll see you later, and then I was like, when? So it's just a very different mentality. Yeah. And then I think, language also speaks itself to that. And I think that was like the biggest realization for me.
Yeah, even though, I mean, in America, New York is one of those places where people pretty much directly tell you what they mean. But I totally know what you mean, because coming from Germany, I had the same reaction when someone says, "How are you?" and I'm like, I'm not doing good. It's like, what happened? So I understood nobody really, it's a different culture, and we kind of have to learn how to navigate that linguistically and also, culturally. Now, when you in Taiwan, when you grew up, were you already back then kind of in an early super talent, some sort of kind of prodigy in Taiwan, and that made you come to the United States? And when you came, you studied at the Juilliard School of Music. How did, not culturally, but also technically or musically, differ that experience, that musical teaching of the Juilliard School in New York from the teaching in Taiwan?
I think when I was learning in Taiwan, actually, first of all, I wouldn't say that I was a prodigy in any sense. It was my teacher who told me that I should study abroad. And my parents were quite resistant about the idea of me going to America at such a young age. So they kind of put it off for a few years until my teacher one day came to our home and then really knocked on the door and really said that I'm actually very serious. I'm not just kidding you around or just complimenting your kid for the sake of complimenting. And so that was the reason that we came to New York to study. And that I think my teacher saw some potentials in me, and then that she hoped that potentials can be nurtured. Yeah. And then when I first came to America, I think one of the biggest difference with the teaching of my teacher in New York and the teacher that I had in Taiwan was the idea of thinking for yourself, the idea of teaching yourself. And I think Asian societies in general, I think kids learn what the teacher tells you to do, whether it's right or wrong. You just say, yes, I will do that. Or it's like it's a very holy thing that you listen to your teacher, and whatever they say, you're supposed to obey that. So you don't really think. Even when you learn the violin with your teacher, the teacher would tell you, say, put the bow here, play longer bow. And you would just do it, but without asking like why I'm doing that, what's the reason for that, and how I'm doing that. And that's something that I learned very quickly in New York. My very first few lessons, my teacher, after I played, and my teacher says, oh, so what did you think of that what you just played? And I was not used to it at all. I was like, just tell me, what can I do better? Just tell me, I'll do it. And then my teacher said, no. I want you to think about what was not good. and what you think can be better. And then you started to open up a whole dimensions of realizing what you're playing, and why you're playing, and what's the reason behind it. And so that was like the biggest, I would say, the biggest difference.
There are always a lot of questions about the violin as an instrument, that guest artists like you play. I mean, this question always comes, and it seems that these questions are always kind of exclusively directed towards a violinist, So if you have a flute soloist or so, chances that the question is like, what brand of flute do you play? It's very unlikely, to come up. So it probably has to do with, with the myth of the Stradivarius violins. And so, but, so typically the violins that, artists of your caliber play are very old. There's a lot of stories that are embedded in the instrument, and maybe even a brand name, So, but all those stories of the violin, and your violin in particular too, does that knowledge of the history of the violin influence your approach to the instrument or to the sound? I mean, or is this basically something that you kind of dominate in many ways, in terms of sound also?
I think the histories of the instrument definitely definitely makes impact on any performer with the shared backgrounds of what it is. And I always consider violin as an artwork, and it's a living art, and it's something that will live much longer than all of us will ever have. And but in terms of playing the instruments, I don't think about the history of that, and I don't think that informs my playing to that particular instrument, because everyone plays differently towards a same instrument. Whoever was the custodian of my violin before me plays very, very differently from the way I play, and how she approaches to this particular instrument, catering to their playing style. It's very different. And then I think that's also one of the magics of the instruments, that the instrument kind of mold with any particular performance, and then they try to be the best match they can be. And it's really like a relationship. You do the best that you can, and if it match, great. And if it doesn't, then you probably move on, or you return the instruments and then find another one, or you buy a different one. So it's very much a matchmaking. And for me, this particular instrument has a very substantial history in the music histories. Was made by a great Italian maker, Giuseppe Guarneri del Jesus, in 1742, and he, along with Stradivarius, are considered to be the two greatest instruments maker that's ever lived in the whole world. And they actually live on the same street in the northern town of Milan called Cremona, which is a place that supposedly the mecca of violin, where all the great makers came from that town. It's a very small town. And this violin holds a particular history because this was the concert violin for a great Polish violinist and composer, Henry Wieniawski. For those of you who are violinists or avid violin players, Wieniawski wrote two of the great violin concertos, as well as many, many wonderful concert pieces. And this was his concert violin for much of his career. And so, it definitely carries a certain amount of weight for any violinist to be picked up these instruments to perform. And then knowing that the sound of this violin was the sound that he had envisioned for the concertos. So it's a very special thing. And I've been very, very fortunate to be using this violin for the last 6 or 7 years. It's on loan to me from the Stradivarius Society of Chicago. I'm very fortunate.
Yeah, well, and you sound awesome on it. So I believe we have some questions. So I'm going to turn it over to our Long Beach Symphony president, Kelly Lucera, who will lead us through the Q&A portion.
Thank you both for allowing us to be part of this conversation. It's fascinating. We do have a number of questions. The first one is from Teddy, and it goes to Paul. Is there a piece that you've not yet performed that you're looking forward to mastering?
Oh, there are so many, Teddy. Way too many. You name it, actually. Actually, next season I programmed the Shostakovich Concerto, which I have not played, and it's a piece that I've always wanted to do. And so that's already one. And then there are so many, chamber music repertoire that I still love to, delve into, as well as sonata and so many things, actually. And, like the Britten concertos or the Szymanowski sonata. Yeah, there's just so much to even to begin with. And so it's a lifelong journey for violinists, because we're blessed with so many great repertoire.
That's true. And Linda asks, this is for you both, what is your craziest behind the scenes performance day story, such as an instrument breaking or wardrobe malfunction? Or do you have, everybody has one of those stories. What is yours? This is for both of you.
Eckart, do you want to take the lead?
Well, I'm thinking about it. It's like, I mean, when you have kids, they come to the concert hall, there's always something that's going to be weird, that they talk and scream until your head, and in your ears, until you actually really close the door and walk out on stage. But actually, two of the kind of most memorable are related to one of those things that we wear, the cummerbund, which is like the most archaic, most horrible thing that you can wear. Once I forgot it, and I was ready at the concert hall and had 30 minutes to spare. I went back home and drove back, and the other one was actually the typical, wardrobe malfunction. I was waiting for that to happen for years. We're enjoying, I don't know, was it Brahms or Bruckner or whatever symphony, that thing came off and it fell down, and it was in the middle of the symphony. So at the end of the movement, I picked it up and I walked outside, and the orchestra was like, and then I put it back on and I walked back out, and so on. And so show goes on. But it's time to actually get rid of. So after that, I actually sewed it together so it will not come off anymore. So.
Oh, good. Well, I think I have two most memorable ones, actually. One is when I was quite young. I think I was about 13 or 14. I had a performance with an orchestra. I remember it was the Saint-Saëns Concerto, and I had caught a stomach virus that morning somehow. I must have eaten something bad the night before, and then I couldn't even be standing to do my dress rehearsal, and the conductor was so sympathetic. So I actually ended up sitting for the dress rehearsal. And then I remember I didn't think that I actually can play that night. And so the orchestra took me to the ER, and then I was in the ER the whole afternoon with, they inject me with some protein and, just like energy stuff. And so I was in the ER until like about 6 o'clock. And then I went back to the hall and then play. And then I cried after I played because I didn't think I could do it. And I was 13, I literally cried after I played. I didn't know I could actually do that concert. So it was very memorable, very vivid. And the next one is also, I guess, wardrobe malfunction, but it was kind of a double wardrobe malfunction somehow that day. Just was a bad day for me. Men's have, like black shoes, right? And then they comes in different forms. Some of them are shinier, some of them are just normal black shoes. So I have 2 pairs in my suitcase, and one is the concert shoes, that's like the shiny one, and then one is just like a normal black shoes. Also, it's presentable. But the shoes, they all come. I put them in the shoe box, so each shoe is on its own. It's not like a pair together. And then so they happen to be the same brand, so the outside all look the same. And then somehow picked up the wrong pair. So one is shiny, one is not shiny. So I went to the hall with one shiny and one not shiny. So I think I have a picture of that on my Facebook somewhere, like 4 or 5 years ago. That was in LA actually. And then that day, even worse is that my dry cleaning, the store, they put the pants and my jacket separately. they're supposed to put them together. They're supposed to hang them together as a suit, but somehow they separated that day. And then so I assumed that the pens was in the jacket, so I only brought the jacket and I didn't bring the pens. So it was a double thing. And luckily, because I was performing at Coburn, the music school, so I asked the stage hand people to call like one of the students in the dorm. It's like, who has my size? So ended up wearing black pants from one of the students. He rushed down and brought me his pen, and then I ironed it even myself backstage, like right before I go on stage, and then wearing my sneakers on stage because the two blacks, was just not gonna work. So.
Well, thank you. We have time for one more question. So I'm going to ask Bob's question. At what moment, and this is for both of you, did you realize you wanted to make a career out of being a professional violinist or a professional conductor? Do you remember that moment?
Eckart?
Oh, there was no moment. At the time when I was actually performance ready, I had already so many years of my life invested in this business that there was no backing out anymore. No, there was actually one experience that I remember very vividly, and I was in boys choir for 8 years, and I started taking, like in 6th or 7th grade or so, I started taking like conducting lessons, and it was all very informal in many ways. But then on Sunday mornings, the choir would sing, and then the conductor was just not there anymore for some reason. And I was the only one there who had taken conducting lessons. So everyone said, go. And I was horrified. I was horrified. And I will never forget the moment when I lifted my arms and I just said, all right, let's see what happens. And just lowered my arms and they started singing. And it was amazing. It was amazing. So this, it's one of those, it wasn't a power trip, but it was the magic, the very first time you feel the magic, and always trying to recuperate that feeling whenever I conduct. So
I think I have a very similar stories actually, but I wanted to play the violin specifically, and then because of a concert that I heard in my hometown, and then so I told my parents I wanted to play the violin, and I was a relatively shy kid when I was growing up, and so I didn't really speak a lot. I didn't like to speak a lot, but at the same time, kids, they crave for attentions in one form or the other. And I remember a year after I studied the violin, I had an opportunity to play at my church at the assembly on the Sunday service. And then I had the moment that, wow, it's so amazing to go on stage and then to perform where you get all the attentions from everybody, and then they listen very quietly to you. And at the same time, I don't have to use words. And I think that was the moment for me that this is so special. And then this is something that I wanted to do, because later on, now I realize this is the communication of music. This is the power of music. And, that's why music brings people together, not words, but music bring people together. And then I guess I must have felt that when I was young already, and never thought about doing other things actually. And I'm happy that I'm still passionate about this and calling this as my job.
Oh, what a beautiful response and a lovely ending to this series. Paul, thank you so much for joining us today. We really appreciate it and getting to know you better. It was really, really special for us. And Eckart, great job being a host, as always. And thank you all for tuning in to Musically Speaking today. We look forward to bringing you our next program. It's our Violins of Hope discussion, featuring panelists Eckart Preu and violin maker Avshi Weinstein, live from Turkey, violinist Niv Ashkenazi, and chair of Violins of Hope, LA County, Suzanne Rato. We look forward to seeing you all again very soon.
Bye.